Good day. Mansoor Ismail here again on Geomuseums by Mansoor. In the previous episode, I spoke about Iraq and the petrodollar model. I'm going to speak to you now about Venezuela and its petrodollar model. Unfortunately, it is worse than that of Iraq. Hmm? How did it go? Now, one major difference why the Venezuelan case happens to be worse than the Iraqi case is because of geography. Geography. Why? Because Venezuela happens to sit in the same hemisphere, in the same neighborhood, with them, with the United States of America, which is essentially the Americas. Iraq is far from America. Iraq is in the Middle East, quite far from America. So all America could do was essentially take its money. It could not take its oil. But in the case of Venezuela, it is just almost next door, just a little, just a relatively short sea trip, and you have moved from the coast of Venezuela to the coast of America. That is one important difference. Again, another important difference is that don't forget that when it comes to crude reserves, Venezuela is actually number one. Venezuela actually has the largest crude reserve of any country in the world, even bigger than that of Saudi Arabia, over 300 billion barrels of crude. So, in the case of Venezuela, how did America bring, or more accurately, force, Venezuela into the petrodollar scheme? Now, what did they do? Classic state capture. It's very recent. I'm not sure it's up to 3 or 4 months, and I'm sure you all had the story back then. America simply went into Venezuela and picked up the president and his wife, President Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores. They gave all sorts of spurious excuses. They said he was a drug lord and everything. All those things they accused him of have essentially fizzled out in the American courts. We are hearing nothing of those drug charges anymore. His major crime was that he did not surrender the Venezuelan crude industry to American petrodollar interests. Instead, it was hobnobbing with the political adversaries of America, particularly China, Russia, Iran. And he was trading Venezuelan oil in yuan and other alternate currencies like ruble instead of the American petrodollar. So what did they do? They simply came in, killed his presidential guards, over 80 of them, picked up him and his wife, Celia Flores, flew them to America and threw them in jail. After they threw them in jail, do you know what America did? On the force of arms, at gunpoint, they made a new rule. And the rule is that every liter and every barrel of crude Venezuela extracts cannot even be sold on Venezuelan soil, cannot even take off from the Venezuelan coast. It must first be transported to America. So if you want to buy crude oil from Venezuela today, you are an individual, you are a company, you are a country. You cannot buy Venezuelan crude on Venezuelan soil. You have to go to the United States of America and go and buy the Venezuelan crude from there. That is actually what currently obtains with respect to the, as you can see, it is worse than that of than that of Iraq. At least the oil still sits on Iraqi soil. It is the money that gets domiciled in American banks. But in this case, both the oil and the money gets domiciled in American banks. And then after you buy the crude from the as in from the Americans, you pay to the Americans. So essentially, the Americans get to decide how much they earn from Venezuelan crude. They get to decide how much, or even if they do at all, tell the Venezuelans that this is how much we sold your crude for this amount. And then they now also get to decide how much they give Venezuela of its money. In fact, every month, the current acting president of Venezuela, her name is Delcy Rodriguez, essentially submits a monthly budget, not to the US President Donald Trump, but to the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So America and Venezuela are not even ruling president to president. They are ruling president to secretary. In fact, Marco Rubio is currently the de facto president of Venezuela. That is what it means. So she writes to Marco Rubio, this is how much we need for what this month. Marco Rubio now dissents. I will pay for this, but I will not pay for this. I will give you money for this, but I will not give you money for this. I will shell out cash for this, I will not shell out cash for this. This month, again, like the Iraqi model, I'm giving you 10%. That month, I'm happy with you 90%. In fact, next month, nothing for you, I'm pissed at you. Essentially, Marco Rubio gets to decide, what Venezuela gets of its own oil. So Venezuela has lost both the oil and the money, while Iraq has lost the oil, at least, but, as in has the oil, but has not lost the money. That is how the Venezuelan case, that's why the Venezuelan case is even worse than that of Iraq. Now, this is the model that Donald Trump actually wanted to duplicate in Iran until they ran into trouble. He only recently finished the Venezuela model and he was high on his success. He was really on a roll. He was drunk on the success of his state capture into the petrodollar scheme model. It worked for Iraq donkey years ago. Donald Trump was not in power then. But right while he was in power, he attempted the Venezuela model and it worked. He captured Maduro and his wife, and because of that, every other leader in Venezuela simmered for him and essentially did whatever he wanted with the oil and as a result with their country. And because he felt that it had worked in Venezuela, why don't I quickly proceed to do the same thing in Iran? Don't forget that Iran is number 3. Saudi Arabia is number 2. It had been captured since for donkey years, since 1974. So Saudi Arabia had been taken into the petrodollar scheme since 1974. Yeah, and the Saudi is number 2. Venezuela is number 1. It was just only recently captured. Why don't I quickly duplicate the same model for number 3? That was essentially the thinking of Donald Trump. And he quickly lashed upon Iran. And that was why the first thing he did was kill the supreme leader. Don't forget that the first thing he did in Venezuela was capture the president, right? He actually assumed that the moment he killed the supreme leader is not essentially capturable. His security forces are very brutal. And if he comes in, if they parachute in to try to capture the supreme leader, they may face a lot of resistance and they may lose a lot of. So instead, they actually decided to kill him, thinking that just like Venezuela, the moment they kill the supreme leader, every other leader of Iran will essentially mellow and simmer and allow America to have everything they want to have of Iran's oil resources, a la the petrodollar state capture scheme. Unfortunately, it backfired. Now, how it backfired exactly is how we are going to be discussing in the next video. Don't forget, we are still on the importance of the Strait of Hormuz. We are still doing what? We are still contextualizing why, the battle for the Strait of Hormuz may actually be the most consequential battle of this Iran versus America war. Thank you very much. See you in the next episode. Again, don't forget to like, to share, to follow, to comment, and ask your questions. Thank you very much.